Well, hi, this is Root Source, Israeli Jews teaching Christians worldwide. I'm Bob Odell, and I am so pleased today to be hosting an Israeli Jew for one of our segments. I'd like to introduce you to Nehemia Gordon.
Shalom, Bob. It's great to be here.
I'm so glad to finally sit face to face with you. I have seen you on broadcasts. I've heard about your amazing success with your podcast.
Yeah.
You are an author, you are a speaker, and it's just great to have you here with us today.
It's really great to be here.
Now, our program is about Israeli Jews, and even though we're recording here in Austin, Texas, as you can get a little glimpse of that out the window there on this summer day, you are from Israel.
Yep.
And so tell us a little bit about your history.
Well, I was born and raised in Chicago.
Not New York.
No,
Chicago.
Definitely not New York. My great-grandfather actually was a rabbi in Eastern Europe, and it was always his dream to immigrate to Israel, to make Aliyah. Back in the 1920s, that wasn't feasible for him, so instead he moved to what they called back then the Golden Medina, the Golden Country,
Okay.
where the streets were paved with gold, and he became a rabbi in Chicago instead. But that dream of making Aliyah was always something I heard from when I first was able to speak.
Really?
That we are Jews, and God gave us the land of Israel. We should be there in the land of Israel.
Wow.
And that was always, it was just a given that one day I would move to Israel, for me.
And when did that happen
So
for
in
you?
1993, I moved to Israel.
All right.
And I have 4 sisters. 3 of them and their families live in Israel. I have one who lives in Seattle. And so most of my family has now moved to Israel, and I've been a Jerusalemite for over 20 years now, and I love it. I absolutely love it. I do have this.
So Jerusalem is what you
Jerusalem
call
is my
home.
absolutely.
All right.
And in the last few years, I've actually been traveling around the world quite a bit. I call myself the Wandering Jew. And my home base outside of Israel is here in Texas, down in San Antonio lately. But I also spent a year of that time in China, which maybe we'll talk about.
I hope we will
And
in another segment.
it's been exciting. I've been all over the world, had the opportunity to travel, meet people, talk to people. I'm currently doing a podcast series called Hebrew Voices. And the idea of Hebrew Voices, it really started out for me traveling around and teaching in churches and synagogues around the world. And sometimes I would get people who come up to me after I spoke and said, we almost didn't have you speak here because you're not part of our denomination. You're not. If I speak to a church, they'll say, you're not even part of our religion.
Yeah.
And we can't even have somebody from the other denomination speak. How can we have a Jew speak? And they'll tell me, we're so glad we had you speak. And it got me thinking, they'll tell me they were so blessed and learned so much. It got me thinking, what else are they too afraid to hear about?
Yes.
And that was the idea of Hebrew Voices. And I'm what's known as a Karaite Jew, but in the series I interview Orthodox Jews, Hasidic Jews, all kinds of Christians, Messianics, all kinds of different people, and hearing their Hebrew perspectives, their Hebrew voices.
Now we're going to get to some of these things. The Karaite thing, I really want to understand that better. But before that, you went to Jerusalem in 1993.
Yes,
you
sir.
made Aliyah. When did you decide to become this author?
I never decided to become.
thing?
I didn't even. I never decided. It was something I sort of. I would guess you could say God led me into. It was
what
not my plan.
What did you do before this?
So I did my bachelor's degree in biblical studies and archaeology.
Where?
At Hebrew University of Jerusalem.
All right.
I worked on the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Hebrew University Bible Project, working with Hebrew manuscripts. Eventually finished my master's degree in biblical studies. And my goal was to be an academic. That was the goal. Yeah.
But now when you say you worked on the Dead Sea Scrolls, what does that mean?
Yeah.
I mean, are you touching the...
Nobody touches the scrolls. Nobody has touched the scrolls except for lab texts since for the 50s.
So obviously you mean comparing that which is in the Dead Sea Scrolls to what is in the Masoretic text?
Well, that was part of it. So there's something called the Dead Sea Scroll Publication Project, which is the official publication of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And their mandate was to finish publishing all the scrolls by, I think it was 2012. They had a 10-year time frame to finish publishing all the scrolls. And I was one of the people who worked for that project in actually putting out and publishing the scrolls. And in that context, I also had the opportunity on something called it was a separate publication that came out of that, where I actually translated some of the scrolls under the auspices of Emmanuel Tov, who was a professor at Hebrew University, who's the head of the Dead Sea Scroll Publication Project. And one of my jobs doing that, I actually did an episode of Hebrew Voices with Professor Emmanuel Tov about this. One of the things that he tasked me with doing was making sure that no scrolls were missed. You know, there's these conspiracies that some scrolls were being suppressed.
Right, pushed away because they might reveal.
So the reality is, if anything is missed, it's because there's thousands of fragments and it's possible to miss something.
Yes.
So one of my jobs, it wasn't the main job, but one of my jobs was to go through all the thousands of photographs and identify every single fragment and every single photograph and make sure everything was published. And it was painstakingly, meticulous, which is what I excel at. So,
wow, interesting.
So it wasn't my aspiration ever to be an author, or certainly not to come speak to Christians. That was something that was never on my radar.
We'll get to that too.
It really was a matter of I was, in academia and wanted to pursue academia, and ended up interacting with Christians who would come to Israel, and I would have these conversations with them, and I would see that they had this yearning for understanding Judaism as it was at the time of Jesus, and which wasn't something I had all that much interest in. I was interested in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which was roughly the same period.
Right.
And really, I'm a Karaite Jew, and we'll talk about that as Old Testament. That was my thing. But I saw they had this desire and this yearning for understanding the Judaism of 2,000 years ago. And I realized I've been blessed with that knowledge. I took for granted that I had the opportunity to go study at Hebrew University and read the Bible in Hebrew. Like everybody at Hebrew University, the starting point is you can read the Bible fluently in Hebrew, and then you take that to the academic study.
Right.
So that's no small thing in studying ancient Hebrew documents. And I realized I need to share information with those who want it and need it. And that's really what that led to me into a sort of teaching ministry, which isn't something Jews usually do, but teaching anybody who really wants to understand what I call the ancient Hebrew sources of faith, which for Jews is the Old Testament and Dead Sea Scrolls and the Talmud maybe even, and for Christians that includes all of that plus the New Testament and the ancient Hebrew sources of that.
Well, that's great, and I want to talk about some of these things because you have some fascinating stories.
Yeah.
So when we return, I think I want to talk to you about what it means to be a Karaite Jew. Would that be okay?
Great. Absolutely, I'd love to talk about that.
Okay.
Yeah.